This happened in 2019, when I was in my second year of college, living in a townhome about a 10-minute walk from campus. I had 2 roommates, but they were both back at their parents' homes for the holidays. I was working in healthcare at the time, and had to stay in town to work through Christmas. Here's some backstory to set the scene. We used to have a 4th roommate, but she moved out after some serious issues with her boyfriend. He was a nightmare, constantly overstepping boundaries and practically living with us despite only being allowed to visit occasionally. Things escalated one night when he got physical with her and verbally abusive with the rest of us. We told her he had to go, and when she refused, we warned that we'd have to involve the landlord. She ended up moving out on bad terms with all of us. For context, I've been in an abusive relationship before, so I truly understood the position she was in. I spent 2 years trying to help her see what was happening, but at that point, it was affecting everyone, and we no longer felt safe with him around. She made her choice and left. Fast forward to Christmas Eve. I had to work the next day, so I locked the doors, turned off all the lights, and headed to my bedroom downstairs to wind down. I spent about an hour scrolling through TikTok when I heard something above me. The distinct sound of chairs being moved in the kitchen, which was directly over my bedroom. At first, I brushed it off. Maybe it was the neighbors next door. Our townhome shared walls, and they could be pretty loud sometimes. But then I remembered they weren't home. They'd texted me earlier, asking if I could grab a package for them while they were away. That realization made my stomach drop. The noise stopped quickly, so I convinced myself it was nothing and tried to relax. But then my bedroom door creaked open. In that moment, I froze. A flashback of my 2nd grade teacher telling us about her house being broken into hit me. She said she'd pretended to be asleep to avoid drawing attention, hoping the intruder would just take what they wanted and leave. I wanted to do the same, but my damn phone screen was glowing, lighting up my terrified, wide-eyed face. I couldn't even fake being asleep. I was lying there, staring at the door, while a man I didn't recognize stood halfway in my room. The door was cracked open, and we locked eyes. I couldn't make out much, just the silhouette of a man wearing a backward baseball cap. He didn't say anything, and neither did I. It felt like an eternity, but it must have only been about 10 seconds. Slowly, he stepped back, pulled the door closed, and disappeared. I sat there, paralyzed in shock. My mind raced. I knew I needed to call the police, but anxiety took over. If I called, it would notify my parents, and I didn't want to scare them. What if the intruder was still in the house and heard me? What would he do? Instead, I texted the guy I was seeing at the time. Some random guy just broke into my house and came into my room. His response snapped me out of my panic. "Call the police, now." So I did. The dispatcher asked if I felt safe enough to go upstairs and unlock the front door for the officers so they wouldn't have to break it down. My answer was a firm no. I didn't care if the door was broken. I wasn't about to leave my room and risk running into whoever was still in the house. A couple of minutes later, I saw flashlights shining through my window. Relief flooded me as I heard the police knocking on the front door, announcing themselves. They made their way inside and asked me where I was. I cautiously stepped out of my room, and an officer came to escort me upstairs. They told me to wait on the back porch while 2 officers searched the house, guns drawn, while another stayed with me. It felt like a scene straight out of a movie. They moved cautiously, turning corners with their weapons at the ready, checking every room and closet. But after what felt like forever, they told me the house was clear. No one was there. Even stranger, nothing appeared to be stolen. They tried dusting for fingerprints, but came up empty. Then the question started. They informed me that the back door had been unlocked with no signs of forced entry. My stomach sank. I was sure I'd locked it before going to bed. That night, the guy I'd been talking to stayed over to keep me company, but I still couldn't sleep. My mind raced with what-ifs, and I compulsively checked every inch of the house over and over again. I wedged chairs under the door handles on the front door, back door, and my bedroom, desperate to feel even a shred of security. The next day, I told our landlord about what had happened and asked for the locks to be changed. To my shock, she flat out refused to come out or send anyone to do it. For the rest of the time we lived there, the locks were never changed. That experience has stuck with me. To this day, I triple-check every single door before going to bed, no matter where I am. I've since gotten a dog who helps with my anxiety about intruders, and I recently invested in a Ring doorbell for added peace of mind. I can't shake the feeling that it was our old roommate's boyfriend. I wouldn't be surprised if they'd made him an extra key when he was staying there. But if it was him, why didn't he take anything? Why didn't he harm me or the house? And if it wasn't him, and it was someone random, why didn't they follow through on whatever they'd planned? It's a mystery that still haunts me. This happened about 4 years ago, when I was around 8 months pregnant. Very visibly so. I'm not a writer, so bear with me as I do my best to recount what happened. It was close to Christmas, and I had been doing some late-night shopping at the local mall. It was around 9 p.m. when I finally finished up and headed out to my truck. At this particular mall, the parking lot is separated from the building by a small road that loops around the entire complex. To get to your vehicle, you have to cross the road, making the walk back to the car feel a little more exposed, especially at night. As I left the store and started toward my truck, I noticed a man standing in the middle of the road. Our eyes met briefly, and I quickly looked away, not wanting to engage. Something about him put me on edge. At the same time, 2 other men passed by him on their way into the mall. He didn't say a word to them, or even glance in their direction. His focus stayed on me. I tried to shake off the unease and kept walking, but I noticed him start to move. He was following me. Then, I heard him call out, "Excuse me, can you help me?" Being Southern has its drawbacks, one of them being the near-reflexive urge to be polite, even in situations where you shouldn't be. Against my better judgment, I paused and asked cautiously, "What do you need?" He looked around, almost nervously, and said, "Could you help me start my car? I think my battery's dead." Now let me set the scene. I'm very visibly pregnant, walking alone in a dimly lit parking lot. Just moments ago, 2 perfectly capable men had walked right past him, and yet he hadn't asked them for help. Why would he approach me? Someone clearly not in a position to assist. My instincts screamed that this didn't add up. It was time to go. "Sorry, I can't help," I said firmly, picking up my pace toward my truck. But he wasn't giving up. Out of the corner of my eye, I could see him following me. My hand gripped my keys tightly as I hurried toward the safety of my vehicle. My heart raced as he called out again, his tone more insistent this time. "You're really not gonna help me? I just need a jump." "Nope, sorry," I shot back, my voice steady, despite the growing fear bubbling inside me. I kept moving, trying not to look back. All I wanted was to get to my truck, lock the doors, and get out of there. Here's the continuation of your story, keeping the suspense and emotional tension intact. I finally made it to my truck, unlocked it, and jumped inside. My hands were shaking, but I managed to lock the doors just as I saw him start running toward me. Fumbling with my keys, I tried desperately to get them into the ignition, but my hands were trembling so much that it felt impossible. Panic set in as he reached the truck, slamming his hand against my window. "I just need your help for a minute," he shouted, his voice muffled but forceful. My fear boiled over into anger. "No! Get the hell away from me!" I screamed back, my voice cracking. Instead of backing off, he grabbed the door handle and began yanking on it, his face contorted in frustration. "Just open the door!" he yelled, his voice growing more aggressive. That's when something inside me snapped. My instincts shifted from fear to survival. I wasn't just protecting myself. I was protecting my unborn child. In one swift motion, I reached into the console and grabbed my .38 Special. I had my concealed carry license for exactly this kind of situation, and though I had hoped I'd never need to use it, I knew I was prepared. I rolled the window down just enough, aimed the barrel directly at his face, and shouted, "I'm not going to tell you again. Get the fuck away from me." For a moment, time seemed to freeze. He stood there, his expression shifting from shock to realization. He didn't say a word, didn't argue, didn't move toward me. He just turned and ran. I sat there, frozen, my hands still gripping the gun. I couldn't move. My mind raced with what could have happened, what he might have done if I hadn't trusted my instincts. The fear of the unknown was almost as overwhelming as the reality I had just faced. Eventually, I managed to put the gun back in the console and start the truck, though I didn't drive away right away. I just sat there, shaking and trying to process what had happened. The terror of what he might have done, and the fact that I'd had to threaten someone's life, hit me all at once. It's a moment I'll never forget. I hope I'm never in that kind of situation again, but if I am, I know one thing for sure. I'll be ready. Christmas Eve dinner at Burger King. Definitely not how I'd imagined spending the evening. But after working late and realizing my options were limited, it seemed like the best choice. I finished work around 9, had some coupons for BK, and figured it would be a quick and easy stop. When I arrived, I noticed the restaurant was still open, but the dining room was closed. The only way to order was through the drive-thru. The problem? I didn't have a car. Undeterred, I tried walking up to the drive-thru window to place my order, but the young woman working there wouldn't have it. She told me in no uncertain terms that without a vehicle, I couldn't use the drive-thru. Her lack of flexibility annoyed me, and I'll admit I said a few things I'm not exactly proud of. That's when she appeared. An older woman, probably in her mid-50s, stepped into the scene like a Christmas miracle. She offered to let me jump in her car so I could order my food. At first, I declined. I didn't want to be a bother, but she was persistent, kindly insisting until I reluctantly agreed. We got in her car, and I placed my order. Unfortunately, the wait for the food was long. So long that I missed my bus home. I couldn't hide my frustration, and the woman, noticing my disappointment, surprised me by offering to give me a ride. I hesitated. Something about the offer felt off. But she was persistent, in the nicest way possible, and eventually convinced me. After all, I'm a 250-pound, 30-something guy. I figured I didn't have much to fear from a woman in her 50s. Under normal circumstances, I wouldn't have accepted a ride. But I told myself it was fine and got in the car. As we drove, I directed her toward my neighborhood. Things seemed normal at first, but about 5 minutes from my house, she made a wrong turn. Politely, I explained that we needed to head the other way. I even suggested she could just let me out, and I'd walk the rest of the way. That's when everything changed. Her demeanor shifted, the kind smile fading into something sterner, almost unsettling. "I can't let you spend Christmas Eve alone," she said, her voice calm but unyielding. "You're coming to my house." I froze, my unease growing with every word she spoke. Trying to stay calm, I explained that I needed to get home immediately. My dog was waiting, and he needed to be let out. But she didn't budge. "I'll take care of you," she said, her tone firm and almost possessive. I started to realize this ride might not be as harmless as I had thought. As we continued driving, her tone shifted further. She tried to entice me by mentioning cocaine and liquor at her place, as if that might change my mind. But since I'm in recovery, I told her firmly I wasn't interested. That's when things took an even darker turn. She refused to stop, turn around, or let me out of the car. Her driving became erratic, blowing through stop signs as if she didn't care about the rules of the road. My heart was racing, my mind scrambling to figure out my next move. I kept thinking about what might be waiting for me at her house, if we ever got there. I knew I could physically overpower her if it came to that, but what if someone else was waiting for me? I felt a pang of guilt, too. She had been kind earlier, helping me order food, and now the idea of hurting her felt wrong. But the kindness had turned into something twisted, and I couldn't ignore the growing danger. I knew I had to act before it was too late. The problem was, I had no idea where her house was or how much time I had left. Then, I saw my chance. The car in front of us stopped at a stop sign, and another vehicle was paused across the intersection. Her car slowed to almost a complete stop, and in that split second, I made my decision. I jumped. The car was still moving as I flung the door open and bolted out, leaving my food behind. I hit the ground running, adrenaline surging through me as I sprinted away. Behind me, I heard her stop and get out of her car. She called after me, trying to coax me back. Her voice was calm and insistent, as if none of this was strange. But getting back into that car wasn't an option. I didn't stop running until I was sure I wasn't being followed. When I finally made it home, I locked the door behind me and checked every window to make sure she hadn't come after me. My mind raced with the possibilities of what could have happened if I hadn't escaped. What if I hadn't been in recovery? 2 years earlier, her offer of drugs and alcohol might have worked. I might have willingly gone with her, and who knows what could have happened. Kidnapping, murder, trafficking, organ trade. The possibilities were chilling. As a man, I'd never truly understood the vulnerability most women feel every day. But that night changed everything. It made me realize how easily someone with bad intentions could exploit kindness and opportunity. I can't say for certain what her motives were. Maybe she was just an overly pushy stranger with poor judgment, or maybe it was something far more sinister. But I couldn't shake the feeling that I had narrowly escaped something terrible. Looking back, I've debated whether I should have gone to the police. Would they have believed me? Or would they have dismissed my fear because I'm a man? I'll never know if my decision not to report it put someone else in danger. That thought weighs on me,